Welcome to a distinguished public lecture organized by the Jindal India Institute and the Jindal School of International Affairs. Today we are hosting High Commissioner Mr. Federico Salas, the Ambassador of Mexico to India, to talk about the India-Mexico partnership, advancing strategic cooperation. Sir is also accompanied by Mr. Coelho, who is also the head of press and political affairs at the Embassy of Mexico. Without further ado, I would like to invite Ambassador to please start with the session.
Thank you very much. It really gives me great pleasure to be here at the OP Jindal Global University. It's not the first time that I'm here at this campus, but I'm very pleased that I was invited this time to come and talk to you in a more broader sense about the India-Mexico partnership and touch upon some specific issues that I've been asked to address this afternoon, which I will very happily do so. For me, it's a great honor to have Mr. Sriram Shaula here with us, and of course I'd like to thank Hindol Sengupta for his very kind invitation. And all of you, as I said, for being here. I think it's very important, especially that, thinking that all of you, the kind of issues that you're studying, the approach, the academic approach that you're taking here at the university, to have more information as to what countries such as Mexico are doing, or what we are all about on the other side of the world. I think that that's a very important and very productive thing for all of you to be aware of, for a number of reasons. One of them is because, as I will tell you in some detail in a moment, is that we have a long-standing, a historic relationship, Mexico and India, that is, and we have a very productive relationship, and that in spite of the distance that is there, the geographical distance between our two countries, we do share a lot of commonalities, but more importantly, we reach out to each other frequently and on a large number of issues to seek each other's support, help in some cases, but also to see how we can best work together with common values and a common outlook to reach certain goals that are of interest to both of us in the international agenda. I'm glad to see that the title of the talk that is presented is Advancing Strategic Cooperation. And let me start with that because I think it's important for you to know that Mexico and India, we've had now for over a decade what in diplomatic circles we call a privileged relationship. This is something that has brought us closer together in terms of the working groups, the increasing the political dialogue, the contact of all kinds that the two countries have. But one thing, and a commitment that was made a number of years ago, is that our two countries should move towards what is called a strategic relationship. And this is the stage where we are at right now in Mexico and India in trying to develop a strategic relationship. And let me tell you, I will tell you some of the facts of our present relationship and how we can move ahead to develop precisely this strategic relationship for the future. Mexico, as you probably know, is the second largest economy in Latin America after Brazil. And I think more importantly than this fact is that we are the largest trading partner of the United States, being part of the North America Free Trade Zone that includes Canada, the United States, and Mexico. This is, as I said, is the largest market area in the world. And of course, it's a very important element because right now, the growing economic importance of countries such as Mexico for countries such as India is a factor that is becoming ever increasingly important in the present age. Not only do we have that economic relationship with the United States and Canada, but we also have a series of 14 trade agreements that brings us preferential access to 50 countries in America, Europe, and Asia. The reason for the numbers is that, of course, one of these agreements is with the European Union, and that includes 27 countries. So what this basically means is that for any foreign company doing business in Mexico, their market access is not only the market size of Mexico, which is about 130 million people, 1/10 the size of the population of India, but the market access of all these countries that I mentioned is equivalent to the size of the population of India, 1.3 billion people. So obviously, anybody, or any business who is smart enough is looking how to, set up shop in Mexico and take advantage of these opportunities. And I'm happy to say that in this day, about 200 Indian companies are based in Mexico and are doing business. And the range of sectors that they cover is very, very broad, from steel, from IT, fertilizers, agriculture, textiles, automobiles, and now an interesting part of what is happening in the relationship between our two countries is how we are moving into new sectors on the innovation agenda, the digital aspects, for example, startups, artificial intelligence, etc. So this is I think it's a very important element in the relationship between India and Mexico. Another aspect that I think I want to highlight is that Mexico is the largest trading partner of India in Latin America. The volume of our trade has hovered around $10 billion a year. And as I said, that makes us the largest trading partner of this country in my part of the world. And also, what is also very interesting is that India has become one of our top 15, is within our top 15 trading partners in the world. And again, what I want to highlight here is that in spite of the distance that exists between our two countries, we have the weight of importance in our relationship is exemplified by these numbers that I am giving you. Another aspect which I want to highlight is the fact that we have become the largest investor of Latin America in India. There's about 17 Mexican companies that are based here in India, again, in a very wide range of sectors. And I'm sure that many of them you're probably very familiar with or should be familiar with. And let me just mention a couple. I'm sure that many of you have been to the movies here in a Cinépolis hall, right? Yeah, I can see the faces. Well, Cinépolis is a Mexican company. So thank you very much for going to the movies in these halls. Another company that is that you probably have been in touch with, probably without knowing so much that this is a Mexican company, is a bakery called Bimbo. It's the largest bakery of Latin America and one of the largest in the world, which has acquired in the past few years some other companies that were based here in India. And it has now grown from being exclusively in Delhi to being all over the country. And I'm sure that many of you have tasted their products. Other aspects, other sectors where we have a Mexican presence here is the automobile sector, also the IT sector, for example. And we have a few of the of Mexican retail businesses that are actually sourcing many of their products from India, bringing them to Mexico. Sorry about that. Another aspect of the thank you, of the relationship of what I want to say about Mexico is that we are today the 9th largest exporter of products, of any kind of products in the world. The 9th largest exporter of, in all the countries of the world. In the case of India, of course, we're exporting, again, a wide variety of products, which include some oil, but also automobile parts, and some agricultural products such as tomato, chili peppers, berries, avocado, and of course something that I'm sure that all of you are familiar with, which is tequila. And let me stop for a moment there and tell you that I'm very pleased to see that tequila has become the drink of choice here in India, especially amongst young people. Actually, tequila consumption in India doubled last year in 2023. So I would encourage all of you to continue drinking it, and this way strengthening the bonds between our two countries. And I'm sure that you have all enjoyed the pleasure that drinking tequila can bring to you. Many other aspects of the relationship which I think are important, and I will just go over them somewhat quickly. We have also, in the past few years, in the past 5 years especially, increased the political dialogue that exists between Mexico and India. And this is for a number of reasons. One of them is that India itself has realized that for a very long time it was not focusing its attention on Latin America, and that is changing. I think that a lot of it is due to the impulse that the foreign minister, Mr. Jaishankar, has given to Indian foreign policy, sort of shifting the attention towards our part of the world. And I think this is understandable when you think that, India right now being the 5th largest economy in the world, wanting to be, or moving towards becoming the 3rd economy in the next few years, but also having global ambitions of a different kind. Obviously, India has to extend its footprint, its political footprint, economic footprint, cultural, people-to-people footprint around the world. And it cannot do that if it sidelines such a large part of the world as the American continent. So we've seen a change there that I think is very important. The foreign minister himself has been, in his first visit to Latin America as foreign minister, was to Mexico in 2022. And then he has been to the area, I believe, on 2 or 3 other occasions. A few embassies have been opened by India in the region in the past few years. And also we've had the visit of the former foreign minister of Mexico here in India on 2 occasions, in 2022 and 2023. And all of that has, as I was saying, enhanced the political dialogue and the political relationship that exists between our two countries. Let me say here that this political aspect of the relationship and this economic aspect of the relationship that I have just mentioned is a relatively recent development. of the past 5 years, probably the last decade as such. But the relationship, the political relationship, especially between Mexico and India, goes back a few decades. Since India became independent, we worked together, particularly in international organizations, throughout the decades of the 50s, 60s, and later, on a number of issues. One of them was, of course, the whole process of decolonization that was taking place at that time after World War II, and with the creation of the United Nations. We worked together within the non-aligned movement, even though Mexico was not a formal, full member of the non-aligned movement. We were observers, but nevertheless, we worked with countries like India and others in that regard. And we also worked together with India in one aspect where I want to focus on one issue today, which is the nuclear issue. And I know that some of you, I'm sorry, are involved in this in this course and focusing your attention on this. Let me tell you a little bit about what Mexico has been doing in this regard and where the paths of Mexico and India intersected, especially in the decade of the 80s. Mexico, of course, I don't have to tell you this, is it's a country that borders the southern border of the United States. We obviously have always had this gigantic country north of us. We have had a complicated, sometimes convoluted, sometimes aggressive relationship with our American neighbors. But in the 20th century, by and large, we've always been trying to reach an accommodation in terms of what the relationship with the United States has been. Of course, after World War II and the beginning of the nuclear era, one thing that was very clear in Mexico's mind is that we were not going to pursue any kind of arms race, obviously not trying to compete with the United States, but not even competing with anybody else. We always felt that there was no need for us to pursue a very aggressive policy in terms of building up our army, having this neighbor to the north, and that our armed forces were basically going to be focusing on issues of assistance to issues that happened in Mexico, security issues, of course, but a lot of the time was, for example, disaster relief and this type of thing. Of course, we were, following very closely the developments of nuclear policies in the 50s with a great concern, given the rivalry between the United States and the former Soviet Union. And things came to a cusp at a time in 1962 when, as you are, I am sure you are all aware, there was the possibility of nuclear weapons being brought into the American continent or the Latin American continent by the Soviet Union into Cuba, in what is, I'm sure you're all aware of this, known as the Cuban Missile Crisis in that year. And that, I think, made Mexico keenly aware of the need to try to do something regarding the presence of nuclear weapons in our region. That was one issue. Another issue which I think is very important that you should all take into account is the nature of the political landscape in Latin America at that time. With the possible exception of Mexico and maybe one or two other countries, most of the governments in Latin America were military governments, were military dictatorships, actually. And some of them began harboring nuclear ambitions. So obviously, Mexico became increasingly concerned that what was happening in our part of the world could rapidly deteriorate, and that in the presence of this type of regimes, the situation could be very volatile and tremendously dangerous. So one of the things that we did, or a few things that we did, one of them is to start promoting the control and proliferation of nuclear weapons. And there was the creation within the United Nations system of the Committee of Disarmament, something that Mexico was very active in promoting at the time. As I said, not because we wanted to shield the region from this, from the possibility of pursuing nuclear weapons. And we were also very active in promoting the negotiation and eventual drafting of the Treaty of Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. At the same time, and one thing that was very significant, Mexico started pursuing what eventually became the Tlatelolco Treaty for the creation of a nuclear-free zone in Latin America. This was a very daunting process because, of course, we had to persuade especially countries like Argentina and Brazil that had nuclear ambitions to give up those nuclear ambitions. But also, we had to negotiate with the nuclear powers that existed at the time so that they will respect the idea of a nuclear-free zone and keep their toys away from the region. And that was, of course, something that was very vivid, especially after the situation with Cuba in 1962. The result of this, of course, was one of them was the negotiation and signing of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, which is still in force. But more importantly for Mexico, was the negotiation and signing of the Tlatelolco Treaty, signed in Mexico in 1967, and that created, as I said, the first nuclear-free zone in the world. And we're very happy to see that it still is valid, and that it has withstood the test of time all these years. As you probably know, the main negotiator of this treaty was a Mexican ambassador, Alfonso Garcia Robles, who was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for this, together with Alva Myrdal of Sweden, in 1980. Or I'm sorry, 1982. What happened afterwards, of course, is that even though we had managed to keep Latin America free from nuclear weapons, the arms race continued and became more sophisticated. There was an evolution that was taking place between the Americans and the Soviets at the time. And one thing that became tremendously important in the decade of the 80s was the whole issue of nuclear testing. And especially at the time when new technologies of nuclear proliferation were coming into being, especially taking this into space. You may remember this was at the time when the American president was Ronald Reagan, that they were talking about these new policies as the new Star Wars. So at that time, there was a group that was created. It was called the Group of Six, which was included Mexico, India, Greece, Tanzania, Sweden, and Argentina. And this group held a series of summits. One of them was held here in India. And the idea, of course, was to exert pressure on all of the nuclear powers at the time to stop their nuclear testing. The idea behind this, of course, was that the development, the qualitative development of nuclear weapons rested upon the testing of the weapons themselves. So that if you stopped the testing possibilities of the nuclear weapons, then you would be contributing to the non-proliferation of these weapons. We worked very closely at that time with that group, and we worked very closely with India at that time. This is at the time when, I don't know, I mean, you would know this better than me, what the thinking in India was at that time regarding nuclear weapons. But nonetheless, India was a very active participant, and Mexico was, very happy to be working with India at that time, and the other countries, of course, to try to achieve this this goal, which, of course, faced enormous opposition, especially from the Americans, who were, not willing to stop their nuclear testing, but also the Soviets were not also very happy with what was being done. But I think that the effort that was brought there also, even though it was not successful as such, and eventually the group ceased to exist, I think that it did bring to, created or galvanized public opinion and the opinion of many other countries of the world as to what the dangers of this nuclear proliferation was and would continue to be if we didn't do something to actually stop what was happening at the time. I am, unfortunately, of course, this did not develop further after that. Even though Mexico has continued to have a very proactive policy regarding the restriction on the use of and development of nuclear weapons, of course, since then, many other countries have acquired nuclear weapons, including, of course, India. And but we still have, at least from the Mexican perspective, we still have we still have been working very strongly within the UN framework to try to restrict the use, to have countries come to the commitment of no first use of nuclear weapons, and I think we also managed, since Tlatelolco was adopted, to have other areas of the globe declared as nuclear-free zones. That has been the case. So hopefully, I mean, I think that, from the Mexican perspective, we hope that we have made an important, if not definitive, contribution to prevent the spread and eventual use of nuclear weapons. I mean, we certainly have done our best in that regard. And I will be very happy to answer any questions or comments that you may have after that. Let me just, before I continue, to talk about some other aspects of the relationship between Mexico and India, which I think have also been, are important, and I think it will be of interest to you. We have tried to bring our relationship also, not only in the traditional aspects of more trade, more investment, political dialogue, but also take it into the whole issue of cooperation. And we are working very much with India to increase that kind of cooperation, knowledge sharing, best practices sharing in a number of issues. And lately, of course, we have been trying to move into the more innovative sectors of the agenda, such as biotechnology, medicine, certainly, pharmaceutical aspects, development of cancer treatments, which is something that has become very important in the agenda, not only of India, but also of Mexico. And one aspect that I'm very happy to see where we have made some significant progress is in space, space science. The two space agencies of Mexico and India have been working together very closely, and we have developed and worked in technologies, especially to address issues which are of phenomena that are impact a great deal on both of us, such as monitoring natural disasters from space, forest fires, floods, or the consequences of earthquakes, this type of things, which is something that affects India and Mexico, unfortunately, quite a lot. But with this monitoring services or technologies, we have been able to address this type of issues in a more timely fashion, save lives, aid in the reconstruction, and help speed up whatever attention is needed after this kind of disasters take place. The other aspect where we are also working from space has to do with agriculture, monitoring crops, and helping in that regard to increase the yield and the capacity of agricultural land to produce more and better products. And this is something that is not necessarily new in the relationship of Mexico and India, but of course has taken a new aspect now with this space technology. As some of you may be aware of, in the late 60s, there was the development of what became known as the Green Revolution in Mexico, which was basically oriented to find ways to increase the yield of crops in different parts of, in that case, of Mexico. But then that type of knowledge came to India, and I think it became a very important part of our cooperation and our contribution here in India. And I'm happy to say that that type of cooperation still continues to today. And that we are one of the important things about this, of course, that you may sure be aware of, is that thanks to this type of technologies, of agricultural technologies, we were able to avoid famines here in India, or situations of that sort in Mexico, but we also contributed to prevent or control this type of situations in Africa. Another aspect of the cooperation that exists between Mexico and India, of course, has to do with a cultural one. As I am sure you all know, Mexico and India are two, very rich countries in terms of culture. We both come from ancient civilizations, and there's a few indicators I think that will tell you, the kind of richness that we have. One of them, of course, is the number of World Heritage Sites that we have declared by UNESCO. I think India now has 42. Mexico has 35 or 36, if I'm not mistaken. Before coming to India, I was Mexico's ambassador in UNESCO. And at that time, we had the same number of sites, India and Mexico. And since then, of course, India has been adding more and more sites. So every time they come to me, since I've been ambassador here in India, asking for Mexico's support for the next inscription of the site, I said, well, it's you're leaving us behind. And I don't think that's fair. But I'm very happy to see how our two countries continue to collaborate so much, and actually the committee, the World Heritage Committee met here in Delhi, well, over there in Delhi, in the month of July. And again, another side was, Indian side was inscribed in that occasion. But I think another aspect of the cultural collaboration, or the cultural synergies that exist between our two countries, is one that I think is, I'm very proud to always talk about, which is the contribution that my predecessor as ambassador of Mexico to India, Octavio Paz, made in the 1960s. As you know, Octavio Paz was Mexico's ambassador to India from 1962 to 1968. He went on years later to win the Nobel Literature Prize. And of course, he was a poet, he was an essayist, but one of the things that he did was that from his experience as ambassador here in India, he wrote a number of books about basically reflections of his life while here in India. And what is interesting about these books is that they are the ones that in many ways brought the knowledge of what India was, or was all about, to the Spanish-speaking world in the first place, because of course these books were written in Spanish. But then Paz being, even at that time already a very famous figure, and then after he won the Nobel Prize, much more so, the knowledge of India that many people around the world have come from Paz's books. So it's interesting that many people around the world, what they know about India, or what they have learned about India, is seen through the eyes of a Mexican diplomat who was here 50 years ago. And I think that that's very interesting, and if you haven't, I would recommend all of you to read his books, because I think that for all of you as Indians, it would also bring you closer as a reflection of what your country is all about. Sometimes it's very good to see ourselves through the eyes of a foreigner, and maybe we will see things there that we ourselves are not seeing, even though we're right here. So if it's okay, maybe I will stop here, and I will be very happy to entertain any questions or comments from any of you on these topics that I have touched, or any other that maybe I can talk about. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. We are so honored that you came, and taking time out from diplomatic schedule. Always, we are so lucky. And the location of this university in the NCR helps, because if you are elsewhere, it's much harder. But even though we are not in the city itself, we thank you for coming here. I want to just take you up on two matters. One, you spoke about the image of India in Latin America, Octavio Paz and all that. Now, the image of Mexico in India is also something I think we need to develop a deeper understanding of what a diverse and an advanced economy it has become also, because in the popular culture, what has happened is that everything, and especially because of the overconsumption of American content in India, there is a notion that everything to do with Mexico has to do with narcotics and with drug gangs, right? Everybody knows El Chapo and Sinaloa and all these things. And many of them are immigrants. But that's again a very American lens, right? They look at it as a problem. There are only two problems with a neighbor. They do a lot of trade and business, but they say we have drug cartels and we have immigrants. So that narrative of Mexico as a problem state with all these problems has somehow percolated so much that many of us, I'm sure our own students also, don't know enough about the economic modernization and dynamism, and also your democracy and the way it has taken root. These two things are big success stories. I know you've just elected female president Claudia Sheinbaum, and we've been following those of us who are into world affairs know it, but the general public is still looking at it mainly through the lens of these gangsters. Yes. So I would like to know what you could do, what the embassy is doing as part of your cultural diplomacy and all that, to help more Indians know about your country in a balanced way and in a complete way. It's not the defining issue actually. Crime and gangsters are not the defining issue of the country, but that's how they've been made out to be. That's one. Second is the strategic cooperation. The term generally, my new book is just out and we will do a launch for it. Strategic partnership generally has to have a military or a defense or a geopolitical element also, not just trade and commerce. But because of the distance, the geography, be it Brazil, with whom we already have an official strategic partnership, or with Mexico, I'm sure we will sign one. Some people say that these words are not really befitting those partnerships because there is no defense or military or any kind of a counterbalancing agenda. Because normally our core strategic partnerships, we say that they are mainly to help us to counterbalance China, who is our adversary, But it's so different because you're so far away and you have your own economic relationship with China. And of course, you're part of the US, like you said, the post-NAFTA agreement. So my question is, how can we make it strategic in that sense also? And is there room for any kind of military or defense cooperation with India beyond the civilian commerce and the trade and the investments? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Regarding the first issue, let me tell you that certainly a lot of the image of Mexico has been tainted by what's been a lot in the media and in Netflix, the series Narcos and that type of thing. I'm sorry to say that yes, these things do exist. It is a fact of life, but it's certainly not all. And I think we should, keep that in the perspective. Of course, a lot of this has also, gained, especially you also mentioned the immigration issue, gained a lot of attention during the previous, the next to the last American campaign with candidate Trump, maligning Mexican immigrants, or immigrants from all over the world, but especially Mexican immigrants, and making it a main issue of the campaign. I think that it's very difficult to counterbalance that because, of course, when it comes from a candidate to the presidency of the United States, or even worse, from a president of the United States, this kind of image permeates the public image. However, I think that what we have been trying to do in Mexico is to convey, trying to reverse that by conveying the fact that most of the immigrants are people who are making an enormous and important contribution in the United States, and I'm not talking just about Mexicans, but from everywhere. And of course, now Indians are a major part of immigrants in the United States also. So that this qualification of the immigrant as someone who comes to steal your jobs, or is a criminal, or is a rapist, or a drug trafficker, it's something that we all need to counterbalance, not just Mexico, but we certainly are doing our part. Now, what are we doing here at the embassy? Well, I hope that I'm doing my share by being here today, but we also have, I must say, a rather modest public diplomacy outreach through some of our cultural events, talks, and many of the activities that we are conducting. But of course, it's very difficult to reach out to everyone or compete with a Netflix series. in that sense. But I do hope that that the positive image of and the positive aspects of what's happening in our relationship will eventually prevail in the relationship. The second point, I think we need to understand, you know, the strategic aspect in a more broader sense. And this actually brings me, for example, we are having now a drug issue that, I mean, the international drug market that is now involving India and in the American continent. So, you know, without necessarily having a military component to the strategic relationship as such, this is something where I think we want to move in, to have a closer interaction with India to prevent what's happening in that regard. There's also another aspect that is worrisome, which is the human trafficking that is taking place, not only from India but from other parts of this region, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, etc., to America, and basically to Mexico, and from Mexico to the United States. So I think that, you know, when you understand the relationship in a broader sense of what the strategy cooperation should be, these two kind of new factors need to be brought into the equation. The other aspect, of course, is that we do, even though, you know, we don't have any ambition to have any kind of military presence in the area, or that our arms industry is not, is not what Brazil's is, or, but nonetheless, we have vested interest in keeping the Indo-Pacific as a zone of peace and free transit, because obviously there are also enormous quantities of Mexican trade that is going through here, through this region. So all of these, I mean, these are, you know, a few aspects, I think, that still need to be elaborated a bit more, but I think that that's where we can move into as we move towards the future and eventually have a strategic relationship understood in this broader sense.
Thank you very much for accepting our invitation, and thank you to Sriram. You know, last time I met you, and since you mentioned Octavio Paz, we were doing a podcast in Lodi Garden, and as it so transpired, Octavio Paz, among his writings, had written a poem on Lodi Garden. So we had an opportunity, His Excellency and I, to reflect upon some of the observations of the great writer, sitting in a place that he knew so well. I wanted to touch a little more, because I teach the course and my students are here. I wanted to just ask you a question on the nuclear, you know, delving deeper into the nuclear issue. Now, you gave us a very insightful overview of Mexico's journey towards non-proliferation and also spreading non-proliferation. But today we stand in a very different world, Excellency. In the Middle East, there is talk of, you know, proliferation of nuclear weapons. The Saudi Arabia has come out and said that they will definitely acquire nuclear weapons if the Iranians, you know, step over the threshold, so to speak. In our own neighborhood, a recent report suggests that Bangladesh is trying to, you know, in some senses, build some kind of a bridge or an umbrella, whatever term we want to use, with Pakistan to get some sort of, you know, nuclear connection, as it were. So we're in a very sort of troubled world as far as nuclear weapons are concerned. I wonder if you could reflect on, you know, your thoughts, and indeed from a Mexican point of view, what is going wrong or what went wrong with non-proliferation, and how do you see this present moment?
Well, I think what went wrong with non-proliferation was basically the lack of the lack of political will on the part of the would-be proliferators to comply with what were some of the restrictions that we're all aiming for. I think that you are right. I mean, this is a very dangerous moment. Exactly the situation that you're describing as to what's happening in the Middle East or could happen here is precisely the kind of fears that we had about what could happen in Latin America in the 60s. And that is something that, forced us to act very proactively. Of course, the international context was a very different one, certainly. But the motivation was basically the same. And I think that it would probably take a lot of, political bravery, and I don't know if it's there, on the part of some of the leaders of these regions to try to stop this from happening. We've seen that also in the case of Korea, North Korea. This kind of reckless situations which, if worse comes to worse, could actually, lead to a very dangerous situation. And that is something that, we all certainly would like to avoid. Now, unfortunately, we're also living at a time when the credibility of the international institutions is at a very low point. So trying to bring in the United Nations and its organs dealing with disarmament and with questions of proliferation, etc., into the equation is, I don't know if it's going to be even counterproductive at this point. But you do need, I think, to bring the issue to the top of the agenda, and where it's not. I mean, this is not something that is now being talked about in international fora with any serious consideration. For example, last year during the presidency of India of the G20, it was never mentioned. It is now taking place in Brazil. This is a non-issue, and that's a big problem because we're all putting it under the rug, and as long as it remains there, it's a very dangerous situation.
Thank you very much, sir. With your permission, sir, we'll open up for questions from students and other professors. Would you like to take them from here, sir, or would you like to sit?
Okay, I'll take it from here.
Okay, all right. Okay, yes, sir. Go ahead. And please do ensure that there is a gender balance in, questions asked. Very important for us to maintain that. Shouldn't only be men. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Your Excellency. My name is Vedant. I am a second-year BA Diplomacy and Foreign Policy student. Before I ask my question, I want to echo the sentiments of Dean Chaulier. Congratulations on a successful transition of power with President Sheinbaum coming into power. I wanted to ask you a question regarding energy security. During the presidency of President López Obrador, we saw Mexico sometimes prioritizing their trade and economic needs over perhaps their climate priorities or their sustainable energy needs. However, with the presidency of President Sheinbaum, it is expected that this will be much different considering her background in climate science. I want to ask you how this would affect India-Mexico relations considering the immense amount of trade that we do across the oceans, and also how it will affect Mexico's climate diplomacy on the global stage.
Thank you. As with, I think that, when you look at what happened during the past administration in Mexico, is that at the beginning there was really not much of a commitment in this regard, but there was an evolution. I would probably say even a silent evolution. We never kind of, promoted it as something that that the government was, very, proactive in. But nevertheless, the question of renewable energies became an important issue in Mexico during the past administration, even though, as I said, it was not anything that was on the top of the agenda, nor was it spoken about much. I think that we do expect to see a change in terms of a larger commitment in this regard, not only because of the background of the new president, but also because, you know, when she took office last week, she specifically mentioned this in very explicit terms. And so we would expect to see a new development in this regard. And there have been new things that have been happening in Mexico that are probably not too well known in terms of, for example, the increased use of solar energy, especially in the northern part of the country, which is a desert part of the country. So obviously, a lot of advantage can be taken from solar energy. We have also been, moving very aggressively towards electromobility, and I know that both the president and the now Minister of Trade of Mexico, who was the former foreign minister, who's the one that I mentioned came to India on 2 occasions. And on the 2 occasions that he came to India, he was very impressed by what he saw in terms of some of what was being done here in terms of renewable energies and electromobility and that type of thing. But of course, at the time, being the foreign minister, he really couldn't do too much about it except bring the good news to Mexico. But now as trade minister, he has that in his agenda, or has more input into that agenda, and I'm sure that he will do much more in that regard. Now, what that will do for the relationship with India, I think it would probably expand new possibilities, precisely from what I'm talking about. When the foreign minister at that time was here, he saw, for example, some of the things that are being done. Some companies in Bangalore, what they're doing with batteries that can be used for motorcycles, cars, buses, etc. That you have these stations that you just come and change your battery, put it in. You don't have to wait there or wait for it to be recharged. I mean, this type of technology, which is high-end technology in terms of green uses. I think that we're going to see more and more of that in Mexico, and that we're going to be reaching out to India more and more for the technology that's here, the knowledge that's here, the know-how that's here. So I think it's going to be a new and increasingly active sector of the commercial relationship between Mexico and India.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am, please.
Good afternoon, sir. Thank you so much for coming. Good afternoon, sir. Thank you so much for coming. It was great to hear your perspective. I am Uttara, a third-year Global Affairs student. I have a very general question. You mentioned numerous areas where India and Mexico have collaborated, where they've reached out to each other to increase their partnership, to advance their partnership. I just want to know, according to your perspective, what are the areas that have not been touched upon yet, that have immense potential, that if worked upon, can even further advance the relationship between the two countries? Thank you so much.
Well, in the commercial area, you mean, or?
In general.
Oh, in general, okay. Well, I think the agenda, as I believe I mentioned, I think the one thing that the new direction of the agenda is going into the innovation sector. For example, the whole question of digitalization, where India is tremendously advanced, and that we're very interested in Mexico in adapting some of these processes to our reality. It will not be necessarily an easy transition. It's not like just buy tomatoes and eat them there. But we're working in that field. The whole issue of biotechnology is also something that we're working on, or that will be developing, and pharmaceutical in general, I would say. New advances in medical research, And I'm mentioning some of this because we have taken so far baby steps in that direction, but that there's interest on both sides to develop that more and more into the future. Artificial intelligence is another aspect where I think that we can both also benefit a great deal. So the whole innovation sector, I think, is where I see new aspects of the relationship moving to. That's where, when it comes to that, I think, the trade relationship will continue to move, has its own dynamic. The investments will continue to be there. But these areas on the economic aspect will, and also, what I was just talking about before, the question of green energies, and all that aspect moving forward. I also think that we are going to, and probably coming back to the first question, we're going to move into a closer and a more I would probably say sophisticated political relationship and dialogue between our two countries. I think that there's many issues where we can still learn from each other, that we can benefit from each other, and that that we can work together. There's many things where we don't see eye to eye necessarily when it comes to some issues in the United Nations, for example, and other aspects of international diplomacy. But in a large swath of the international agenda, I think there's a lot of work that we can do together, and countries such as India here and its leadership position in this part of the world, and Mexico's position in our part of the world, I think we can make important contributions, and I think it's important that countries such as us have a more fluid dialogue about these issues.
Perfect. Yes. Anybody else? Okay. Yeah, the lady there. We'll come to you, Kalyani. One moment. Yes, the lady there. Go ahead, ma'am.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Swamini Joshi, and I'm a first-year Global Affairs student. Sir, you mentioned that most number of immigrants coming in United States are Mexicans and Indians, but in Mexico and India, comparatively, there are very few immigrants from both the countries. So how do you think we can increase cultural exchange between the two countries so that there is cooperation not only on the policy level, but also on a more personal level? Thank you.
Yeah, well, we are certainly trying to have an increased sort of people-to-people contact between our two countries. And we mentioned briefly before this conference began with some of the faculty members about the need to increase the academic exchanges that we have between Mexico and India, and maybe the cooperation between institutions such as this one and institutions in Mexico. Not only to have students, a closer contact, going there, coming here, etc., but also, professors who are doing, joint research projects, publications. I mean, many new things that can be done in that regard. I think that whatever we can do to get to know each other better is a plus for the relationship, and that is something that we're going to be working on. We've been working on it already. We need to do much more. I think you're right. There's not enough of kind of the kind of people that we would like to see from each other's country in the other country.
Yes, Kalyani, please. What we can do is, if there's enough demand, we can try and convince Professor Rajkumar to get a Mexican restaurant in our T6, if Dean Chaulia also agrees. Yes, Kalyani, please.
Thank you so much for the lovely lecture, sir. My name is Kalyani, and I'm a first-year MADLB student. I had a question regarding the energy sector. India and Mexico have signed MOUs on lithium, like the acquisition of lithium resources, and also there have been talks about, nuclear energy as well. And considering that the current government has inherited an energy problem with the fact that Mexico is heavily reliant on fossil fuels for most parts, how can India and Mexico strategically cooperate with the current understanding, the MOUs and the conversations that are present in order to tackle this situation? Because India itself is also developing its nuclear energy sector and has plans to increase energy production, and we have small reactors that are up and coming. So is there any potential that's being seen for an exploration? Because in 2012, Jamie Newlart had given an interview where he said that there is no exploration of investments as of now in the energy sector. So from then to now, what have been the changes? What are the possibilities? If you could just highlight it.
Investments in the energy sector in Mexico?
Yes, within Mexico and even bilaterally, so to speak. Yeah.
No, I mean, this is, last year we signed with CSIR an MOU on a number of issues, which includes the lithium aspect and also the question of renewable energies. If you ask me what we have done about this, I'm afraid to say that very little so far. Which, I was not very surprised about, because this year in Mexico, things kind of slowed down, first because of the presidential campaign, then, of course, the elections. Now we have the new government. So I'm sure things will pick up. And my intention is to push as much as we possibly can, precisely to increase the cooperation. We did have, within the context of that MOU, a few conversations. We have put together virtually some of the scientific brains and the policymakers from Mexico and India. So a few first steps have taken place, but much more needs to be done. And as I said, it's something that's coming for the future.
Excellent. Anyone else? We'll maybe take one or two last questions, please.
There's another lady.
Yes,
here.
ma'am. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Kushagrita Goyal, and I'm a third-year BADFP student. I'm in SIR's nuclear weapons course. My question is regarding the role of nuclear weapons and how it could have benefited Mexico. While I strongly commend Mexico's entire non-proliferation policy, could it be argued that had Mexico possessed nuclear weapons, the geopolitical landscape in North America would have been different and could have helped Mexico address issues with US on a more equal footing than they can right now? Because that's one of the arguments that Pakistan makes for why they acquired nuclear weapons as a response to India's acquisition of nuclear weapons. And a second question I have is that with the increase in demand for nuclear energy, what is Mexico's international response towards the possibility of nuclear technology being shared for nuclear energy purposes, but being repurposed for nuclear weapons purposes instead, which is something India itself did do? Thank you.
Right. No, the answer to your question is no. I don't think that if we had nuclear weapons, that would have benefited us in any way, shape, or form. I don't see. I mean, our relationship with the U.S., unlike the one that Pakistan has with India, is not a confrontational one. I mean, we do have problems, but we always, see how we're going to try to solve those problems for the benefit of both countries. And having something that would be an element that we could use as a threat or a deterrent or something, I don't see how that would have benefited us in any way. As I said, if we had been with the fear, if this had been in the 19th century, I would have said yes, because of course we did face an invasion by the Americans, and they took basically half of the territory that we had at that time. They would not have done it had we had nuclear weapons. But again, this is a century later, that is not valid anymore. Regarding we have no issue with the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. Again, we think that this should be closely regulated precisely so that it is not diverted for other uses.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, please.
Now we get some gender balance.
Yes, so I was wondering.
Good afternoon, Your Excellency. My name is Gopalakrishnan, and I am pursuing BA Global Affairs. Firstly, thank you for a very insightful lecture on India-Mexico partnership. So my question is regarding this: how Mexico has sort of reordered the supply chains away from China, which the US has termed as friendshoring. So in what way can India-Mexico partnership help in sort of balance the Chinese influence in the global south?
Well, of course, there's a lot of being said about the phenomenon of what we call nearshoring, basically, or friendshoring, but as you wish. The truth of the matter is that not all of the investments that are not going to India are coming to America, and that not all of the money or the investments that are flowing out of China are necessarily coming to America. Some of it is. That's one thing. Secondly, you do have the phenomenon of some Chinese companies setting up their operations in Mexico precisely to take advantage and going around the American restrictions that may exist on the export of their product. Now, that is kind of the situation we have right now. If President Trump wins the election, who knows what's going to happen? Because he's been threatening precisely to work against that type of situations. But so far, I think that what you see is kind of a natural process almost taking place. Especially after COVID, and many of the companies wanted to be nearer to the main markets, supply chain resources, and that's kind of an inevitable development that is taking place, and it seems to me that a lot of emphasis was placed on the whole question of nearshoring, but you see now a more diffuse aspect of it. Investments are going not just to Mexico, but other parts of Latin America, for example, for different reasons, different criteria that businesses have. So I think that, as I said, I think that a lot, it was magnified beyond what I think it really is.